still a little shaken up from this. I live in the outskirts of one of the largest cities in the Northeast, in a quiet section of a city with a small town feel. I go to the gym in the suburbs and was headed home after a pretty intense workout. Just ready to get home, pet my dog, and take a much needed shower. Now, to get back into the section of the city from the suburbs, there's this old 4-lane bridge that leads into a few of the main streets of the neighborhood. The lanes aren't separated by markings, but there are signs on the bridge, and everyone respects the 2 cars to a lane policy. As I was driving across the bridge, I stayed in the right lane to go straight across, as the left lane is a turn lane. As I reached the end of the lane, I noticed that the car at the end was over into my lane, about a foot, and I did my best to cut around it. One of my tires ended up a bit on the sidewalk as I made my way into my lane. I glanced over at this guy, didn't flip him off or act aggressively, but I'm sure my face expressed my thought of, "What the fuck are you doing?" The light turned green, and I went straight across. I noticed the car that had been blocking my lane, despite being in the turning lane, went straight as well. Looking at my rearview mirror, I could see an illuminated Uber light in his windshield. I continued up the semi-residential street, stopping at each stop sign on the way up. This car remaining behind me the whole way. As I was already thinking, this guy doesn't know how to drive, I kept an eye on my rearview mirror as I approached the main street in the area. As I was waiting at the light, I noticed that this guy had turned off his Uber light, and something in me realized that something was wrong. I'm not sure what it was, but the Uber light gave me some sort of comfort that this guy was working, and his conscious act of turning it off made me feel uneasy. As I turned onto the main street, I made the first left turn I could, and the Uber made the turn behind me. I was now on a residential street, but as I knew the area, I drove at a conscious pace, making a couple turns, heading towards the highway. The Uber pursued, his bumper about 1.5 feet from mine. Halfway down the residential street, there was no doubt in my mind that I was being pursued. Now, despite me having a very buttoned-up office job and a soft-spoken personality, I don't necessarily think that I'm a prime target for being chased. I'm a big guy. I'm between 6'5" and 6'6", a little under 220 pounds, muscular, and have a ton of tattoos. I'm sure this guy saw me as I pulled up next to him on the bridge, and from my glance at him, he looked older and much smaller than myself. While the thought of pulling over and escalating things did cross my mind, with the rate of gun crime in my city, that thought was gone as soon as it came. All I could focus on was getting to a safe place and making sure this maniac didn't find out where I lived. As I turned onto the highway, he followed again, cutting across several lanes and accelerating to catch up to me. I made the first right I was able to, then led him down a winding maze of back streets, his car inches away from my bumper the entire time. I wasn't paying attention to the one-ways, stop signs, or speed limits at this point. I just knew I needed to get away. All the while, the Uber followed, matching my speed and taking every sharp turn that I did through the maze of streets. Realizing that I needed to get back on a more populated area in case this guy decided to shoot me or hit my car, I headed back in the direction of the main street, spotting on the corner of my eye a parking lot of fast food restaurants that provided a shortcut to the main road. I blasted through that parking lot, the man speeding in after me, and I felt hopeless. If this guy was willing to follow me through all that, he wouldn't stop until he caught me. I weighed my options as I turned onto the main street. The police department was about a 10-minute drive away, but there were several lights and crosswalks between myself and safety. I decided I would head back through the streets in the direction, try my best to lose him as I went. I didn't want to give this guy an opportunity to get out of his car at a red light and hurt me in some way. I had to head in that direction, and I prayed that I didn't hit any red lights. As I rounded the corner of the parking lot, my worst case scenario was revealed. a red light with a car already stopped with opposing traffic. I drove opposite on a one-way to the left with my car ready to make a turn. I know it was irresponsible, but I didn't hesitate. I merged into oncoming lanes and made a left going down the wrong way down a one-way residential street. A few beeps from other cars around me rang out, but I didn't care. I just prayed that I had made an irresponsible enough maneuver to throw this guy off and created enough confusion to get away. I looked in my rear view and didn't see headlights. I drove to the end of the block of the one-way and made a few random turns down side streets, pulling into the parking lot of an apartment complex and turning my car off. My adrenaline was winding down and I couldn't stop shaking. I laid my seat all the way back and called the police non-emergency line. The lady who answered the phone was entirely unhelpful and directed me to call 911. All I had was a brief description of the car and guy whose face I could not recall well. The police told me that they were just going to write it up as a disturbance. They told me to drive home as some time had passed between the chase ending and them getting to me. Being the ever paranoid person I am, I parked several blocks down from my house, changed my clothes in my car, put on a hat, and walked home, on the lookout for this guy in his car the whole way. I thought I saw his car turn left down another block as I walked, but I told myself that even if it was him, he wouldn't be able to recognize me outside my car. Now that I'm home typing this out, my large dog next to me and a drink in my hand, I feel helpless. I'm scared to drive my car in the city and run into this crazy person, scared of what he might do to me. I'm worried this guy will drive around and see my car, find out where I live, and try to come after me or my family in some way. I've never felt this vulnerable before in my entire life. I've never considered purchasing a weapon, but this encounter is making me consider it. All I can do is try to move on and hope that he doesn't get any rides in this area. So deranged Uber driver who chased me through the back streets of my city because he didn't understand traffic patterns. Let's not meet. I came here to tell you my story because there are a lot of people that go through these types of relationships and who are maybe still healing. But I also need some advice. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and when I was 14, I liked older guys. And not guys who were only a year older than me. I mean 3 to 4 years older. That's when I met my ex. He was 17 at the time, and he was a really sweet guy until he started opening up about his mental health and drug addiction. Don't get me wrong, I don't judge him for being mentally unstable, but he never took his prescriptions and just threw tantrums all day, verbally abused me, and overall didn't care about me. I was with him for 2 years until one day he finally blocked me, basically ending our relationship, and I never heard from him since, until 2 months ago. I came from school one day and looked into the mailbox because I saw an envelope. It was unusual for us to receive envelopes unless it was a bill, but it wasn't an envelope for bills, it was one meant for letters. I put it in my purse and went inside the house. I went into my room after I said hi to my mom and opened the envelope. There was no return address or anything like that, but my name on the letter caught my attention. I never received letters from anyone, and I was worried to see a signature that I recognized on it. I started reading the letter. Well, hardly, because the writing was awful. But the person who sent it is telling me how they regret letting me go, and that they want me back. I thought it was one of my friends playing a stupid prank on me, so I brushed it off and put it in my drawer, laughing about the situation. Later at night, I was about to go to sleep when an unknown number showed up on my screen. I looked at this screen confused because I rarely receive weird calls from unknown numbers. I didn't really want to pick up, but I thought maybe it was one of my friends trying to pull another prank on me. I picked up and heard heavy breathing. "Hello?" I said. No answer. "Patrice, are you this bored that you want to pull pranks on me?" Still no answer, just heavy breathing from the other end. All of a sudden, I heard a voice. "Who's Patrice?" My eyes were wide open, and I hung up. I stared at the ceiling in disbelief, and I put my phone on silent mode and just went to sleep. I didn't think that this one phone call was about to be the beginning of my biggest nightmare. I woke up the next morning with several calls, all from that unknown number, and I got a little scared. I opened my phone and saw messages from the same person telling me to pick up and just talk to them. I tried to ignore it, but the calls and messages continued even after I got to school. When I was outside the school gates and smoking a cigarette with my friend, I got a call again. I answered and gave an upset answer. "Dude, who the fuck are you? Why are you calling me?" The person sat in silence for a few seconds, then said my friend's name. My friend heard their name and asked who the fuck I was on the phone with. "You were with Anna, aren't you?" "Of course you are. I can see you." I looked around and didn't see anyone other than my other schoolmates. There were only 6 people around us and nobody was on the call or anything. I got creeped out and hung up. I think I recognized the voice, and it was my ex. I told my friend that he kept calling me and texting me from an unknown number since last night, and I didn't know what to do. She said that I can't really do anything about it, that I should just ignore the calls. As time went on though, I started getting more letters, sometimes even flowers right next to the fence of my home. For context, my ex was from another city, and I never told him where I lived. He knew what school I went to, but never which class I was in. Then I started getting a single rose on my desk once a week when I would get to school. My classmates told me that they never saw the person who brought me roses because they were there by the time they got to class. I was super paranoid. I started receiving pictures of me and my friends outside of the school gate, sometimes even when I was alone. I was shitting my pants whenever I saw that unknown number pop up on my screen with a picture attached to the message. I finally had enough one day and called his number, but he never picked up. I started texting him on the apps that I didn't get blocked on and told him to stop or I'd contact his boss and complain about his behavior and even make fake complaints about his service at work so that he'll get fired. He really needed the job, so he left me alone for a week, but then I started seeing him on the streets, in public transportation, and outside my school. Mind you, this dude lived in another country by the time we broke up and only came back when he started texting me again. I asked some of his friends about when he got back, and they told me he came back to our country the day that I started getting the calls. I could barely leave my house after I found out he knew my school schedule, and I always asked one of my classmates who lived nearby to pick me up with her car on her way to school. One day, I wasn't so lucky. My classmate who used to drive me to school was sick and couldn't show up, so I had to take the bus that day. When I got on the bus, I saw his blonde, wavy hair, and I froze. I literally wanted to cry and didn't know how to get out of the bus without him getting off at the same stop as me. In my country, we aren't supposed to talk to the bus driver while they're driving, but I had no other choice but to ask him not to let him out the bus. I explained the situation and he was thankfully understanding. He didn't let him off the bus. He was banging on the glass door and screaming to be let off, but the driver kept the door shut and drove off. I sighed in relief and started crying while I was waiting for the other bus to come. It's been a month since school ended and I haven't seen him after that, but I'm scared that he might come back when school starts. The police won't do anything about it, even though I started getting threatening letters 2 weeks ago. I carry a pocket knife with me and I've even changed my number, but I don't know what else I can do. The story occurred a few months ago. There are these 3 abandoned houses, as well as 3 barns close to my house. They're all gonna get torn down here in the next couple of months, so my siblings and I thought, why not check them out? I had already checked them all out with my buddy, but wanted to do it again with my siblings this time, because why not? We had only explored one of the houses previously because there's a small window we could crawl through into the basement and another hole through the wall we crawled through to enter the house. Since all the doors are pretty much boarded up, there are two more houses we hadn't explored, one being really small and the other being huge. After some research on the internet, it made sense as it seemed that one of the houses was leased to multiple people, mostly around the age of college or younger families, who maybe couldn't afford to rent an entire apartment. The time before, when I was with my friend, we brought a screwdriver with all sorts of those attachment things that go on the end, so that way we could unscrew all the different bolts and then use a hammer for the nails. When we got there, the board was already torn off, luckily, even though it wasn't the week prior when we first tried to get in. We didn't have screwdrivers that time. Also, let's call this house the Red House, since it was a red brick house. To describe the Red House, it's like you connect two average double-story houses together. It was that big. I mean, we ended up taking an hour to explore it, but that's because we were looking around too. The time when me and my buddy explored it, it was pretty cool. Not too much graffiti and lots of stuff everywhere on the ground. We found old cheap purses, Pokemon and baseball cards, a bunch of broken keyboards, books, and old school supplies, plus a lot of other completely random things. There was even an old tanning bed that I think we discovered was from the late 80s. There were the occasional drug needles and pills, usually in the corner of the old bedrooms or in the bathrooms. This time I just wanted to experience this again with my siblings. It was night when my mother was asleep, so we could actually get away with it. I dropped them off in my car and drove a half mile to a trailhead where I could park my car and my car would be hidden. I then rode my electric scooter the half mile to where they were so we could go in. There was a gate that we had to go over since there was barbed wire, and I folded up my electric scooter and hid it in the tall grass. The road behind the gate led to the first house we had already been to, so we were just trying to go into the big one. From here, you had to walk pretty far through this tall grass to get to the red house. As we approached it, we finally turned our flashlights on and then entered the house. Last time, me and my friends were calling out to make sure no one was inside, but this time it was night, and I didn't want to risk anyone calling the cops if they heard us yelling near an abandoned house at 2 a.m. Regardless, it was a stupid decision. We made our way in and checked around. I think it's also important to note that this isn't the front door, it is the back door. One of the two back doors. The house is on a hill, so from the road, it looks like a one-story, but on the other side, you can see that it's 2 stories. This back door is in the very corner of the house, so you explore from one end to the other. As we walked through, I thought I heard some light footsteps, but this is an older house. I just looked it up and it was built in 1964, has 7 acres of land, and is 3,800 square feet. So yeah, pretty big. Anyways, it didn't sound any different from when me and my friend first explored it, and it was night, so quiet sounds were extra loud. As we made it through the other end of the bottom of the house where the staircase was, and made our way up, I heard more footsteps, and this time, I told my siblings we should go. They didn't hear anything, but they were also under the assumption that we were the only ones there, and they weren't very cautious or aware, I guess you could say. When you go up the staircase, on one side, it leads to the garage, which is very small for such a large house. Again, probably because it's older. And on the other side, you go past a short hallway that leads to the kitchen and family room, with a lounge area. This whole area is super open and it feels like a lot of empty space, but it only covers around half the upstairs. On the other side is a straight hallway with around 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. That's when I thought I saw someone moving from one bedroom across the hallway to the other, from left to right, but my light didn't go very far since I was using my phone light. I started angrily whispering to my siblings who were already kind of close to the hallway which leads to where I saw the person, as not to yell, but to get their attention urgently. They ignored me, which pissed me off, and I quickly walk across the open area to try to maybe yank their arm until I hear something drop. In my opinion, the guy dropped it on purpose to let us know he was there, but after this next part, I don't know. Immediately, my siblings and I jump. It sounded like a bookshelf was knocked over or something, and since it was really loud and heavy, we could feel the floor vibrate as we were upstairs. It was now confirmed that someone was there. We turn around and start running to the staircase, which is pretty much a straight line. The bottom floor sort of zigzags around, and it leads to a hallway that goes straight to the side of the house. As we make our way around the zigzag rooms and make our way to the corner with the hallway, we start hearing running upstairs towards the staircase. We were already running, so we didn't slow down. We turn the final corner and make our way outside, where I run in a straight direction, and then to the left to attempt to hide in the tall grass, which also has a direct line to the other side of the huge grass area to where the gate is. I lay down, and when my siblings run out behind me, I tell them to lay down as well. We were maybe 30 or so feet deep into the tall grass when I see a dark figure run out of the house a few feet, stop, look around, and run into the small house next to this one, which is only like 50 feet away. I thought that the house was boarded up still, but it looked like he ran to the side of the house, where I guess the entry was. There was a large shed thing in the way, so I couldn't exactly see where he went, but I knew there was a barbed fence over there, so we'd have to run behind to where we were to follow us, as there's maybe a 20 feet wide gap where there's no barbed fence, which I guess is how vehicles enter. I heard his footsteps running around, but I couldn't see where he was. We started to army crawl across the grass, but really slowly, as not to make much rustling noise. We start crawling faster, but then I hear his footsteps stop, so either he ran away, or he stopped, maybe looking at us. I kept crawling on all fours since the grass was now tall enough to still cover me, and I was looking behind to see if I could see the outline in the dark, which thankfully, I couldn't see him. We started to hear cracking sounds, and it sounded like he was cracking the plywood boards. But it sounded like he was frustrated, as we could hear loud grunts. We just kept crawling though. We were maybe crawling for a good 5 minutes to get to the other side. Even if we were far enough for him not to see us, it honestly felt like a lot more, and every minute felt like 10. We eventually get to the road which leads to the gate, and at this point we stop outside the gate and wait for a few cars to pass before crawling through. I have my siblings crawl under first, and I swear I heard him running through the tall grass behind me. But as I made my way under and through and started running, I didn't ever look back to see if he was following us. Also, yes, I did get my scooter, which my brother already had unfolded and was riding away with me and my sister running behind. We didn't stop until we got to the trailhead off to the side of the main road, where we threw the scooter in the back, jumped inside and locked the doors and pulled out. We drove off peacefully, knowing that this person was definitely homeless and could not get a car to drive off after us. We made it home safe and sound, and we did not speak about it at all near our parents. My siblings kind of laughed about it more after the first week, but it still scared me knowing how serious it was. I don't think they realized how dangerous it actually was. We survived though, and that's all that matters. I never plan on going back.